All right, so the biggest hook I had for this was a size 16 dry fly hook U003 made by Umpqua. The thread is Vivus A07 16-aught or red. Duck breast feather, great. Then the wire is ultra and extra small, color red. We're going to start by tying our thread in, wrapping rearward till the thread is snug. Then we will snip off the tag, wrap rearward all the way to the bend, and then back up about halfway the hook shank. Now we're going to tie in our tail. It's going to vary on each size and length of hook as to how much tail you use. However, there's a little nifty trick. You can just slip it in there, slide it. As long as you keep it on top of the hook shank, everything should come out nice and clean. I try to hold it out and snug that back end down as much as I can to make that tail fan out. Sometimes it will sever if your feather is weak. Flip that up, go underneath it to about 3/4 of the length, and then cinch it down to build yourself a little bit of a body. Make sure and stay clear of the eye of the hook because you do not want to crowd that eye. I cut this as close as I can at an angle down towards the eye. Now we're going to tie in some wire. I'll start it just behind where I ended that duck quill. I'll go all the way to the tail and then back up, and then we're going to start tying in some other stuff. Now we're going to tie in the body. We're going to tie in these quills the opposite direction, the tips forward. Tie them in good and snug. Tie them all the way down to the front. And then I kind of use my finger to hold these in place as I wrap them. I've found that it's very effective. In just a second, we'll get to wrapping this in and you'll see what I mean. Make sure the first wrap is good. Make sure you cover all the red, and then from there, see how I stick my finger against it on the backside. Just kind of hold it in place, move the thread, then grab it and flip it around. I do overlap to kind of build a tapered forward. Once we get this tied in, we'll flip it back forward, tie it down real snug. See how it's got me a nice thick tapered body there. And when I cut this, I cut it as close as I possibly can. I'm trying my best to not crowd that eye. Now we're going to take the wire, pull it around, and wrap it evenly towards the front, the opposite direction that we wrapped the quills. This is so that if the quills break, they do not come off. The fly will last a little longer in this sense. We're going to do the, I don't know what method it's called. I call it like a reverse tie-in with the wire so that I can just helicopter it off whenever I'm done. So just follow along here. Take a peacock herl, inspect it very closely. There are sides to this. There is a quill that faces off of one side of this peacock herl. Now, if you'll take a close look, we'll look closer at it here in just a second. You will notice that all of the fuzz is on one side of that vein of that herl. You want to tie that in with that vein facing downward. I know I was a little out of order there, but that's just the order that I proposed it. Here's some crystal flash. Gonna slip it in there, slide it back, tie it down. Keep in mind whenever you're tying stuff like this that you use multiple materials, that you tie the last one in first. The last is first and the first will be last. Kind of like in the Bible. Now we're going to tie in some more quills. Take a pretty thick tuft of it off. tie it in with the tips facing rearward. You're going to have to measure this out, and it will take some time to figure out the exact length that you're going to need. I cut this off as close as I can. See how it's tapered down? Now we're going to tie on that peacock herl like we talked about, that vein facing downward. Make sure when you get towards the back, the end of your peacock herl where you're tying it in, you tie a couple loose wraps, because if you get too tight, it will break the peacock herl. Now we're going to wrap it, use the finger to hold it in place in between each wrap. The reason that I was so imperative about doing a tapered even head on this is so that when I wrap this peacock herl, it doesn't slip down to the eye of the hook on me. And as you can see, it worked out. Now we'll tie it off. I tried to use my thread to cut it instead of the scissors, but it right here, but it's too strong, thank goodness. Cut it off with my handy dandy high dollar scissors there. Now we're going to flip over those quills to make the legs. This part gave me a little trouble. It always gives me a little trouble, but I was going to use the flash to tie it in and fold the legs backwards, or the quills, but that didn't pan out for me. It wasn't right. If you take your fingernails and run it down the top of the eye of the hook, you can fan those out just like that. Now you guys can watch me fast forward through a struggle here. I finally get it all pinned down here in just a minute though. Success has been made. Don't be afraid to go behind the hook or the eye of the hook just a little ways when you tie that in. It won't hurt anything. Now you're going to pull down your flash. The reason I flipped this over is because of the taper on that. It was a little bit bigger than I wanted. That's also why I cut that off shy, because I didn't want to compromise my knot. I made sure and kept this knot pushed backwards and tight. Get a couple good whip finish turns in there. Pull it rearward. Then cinch it the opposite direction. Good to go. Cut it off close, and then I'll pull up this crystal flash and cut it off. And there you have it. The duck or pheasant tail. I call it the duck tail.